Hello S1 and welcome to your next lesson on the witchcraft topic. We're still focusing on witch trials, but we're now looking at a Scottish case study. So what we're aiming to do in this lesson is to investigate how witches were put on trial and punished in the 17th century, and to explore a Scottish case study, so actually look at a case which took place in Scotland. So in your jotters, if you want to take down the heading which is Witch Trials, a Scottish case study, or if you're doing this on a Word document, you can obviously type up Witch Trials, a Scottish case study. Now, some people claim that millions of witches were killed in Europe. Now, others made these suggestions. So, you have down the left hand side here regions, so different parts of Europe at this time. So, we've got the British Isles in North America, so that's Britain and North America. So, we've got number of trials 5,000. Number of executions is estimated to be around about 1,500 to 2,000. We've got the Empire, so Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, Alsace-Lorraine, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. 50,000 trials and around about 25 to 30,000 executions. We have France, which they reckon around about 3,000 trials took place with about 1,000 executions. Scandinavia, so that's like Norway, Denmark, Sweden. 5,000 trials, around about 1,700 to 2,000 people killed. Eastern Europe, so Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, Russia. 7,000 trials with about 2,000 executions. And then Southern Europe, so places like Spain, Portugal and Italy. 10,000 trials and number of executions 1,000. So if you could try and draw this table in your jotters, and what you're looking to do is to add up the total amount of trials, because that's blank at the bottom, and the total number of executions. So you want to pause the video at this point to draw this table and try and add up those figures there. Now, using the table there, we're going to do a bit of Numeracy Ninjas. So use your table to answer the following questions. Now, which country had the most trials and executions? Now, it says which country brackets countries, so it could be also a group of countries based on the table. Which of those had the most trials and executions? What is the total number of trials and what is the total number of executions? So write the answer on your copy too. So from the table, make sure you add up what was the total number of trials and total number of executions. And question 3, why do you think less than half of the people put on trial were eventually executed? So what do you think the reason for that might be? So again, you might want to pause the video at this point here, use your table to help you to answer these 3 questions. Now, we're focusing now on a Scottish case study. So we're looking at the city of Aberdeen and Aberdeen witch trial. Now, between 1597 and 1669, records show that at least 34 witches were tried in and around Aberdeen. Now, many of these were found in Inverurie or Kirriemuir and were caught by a local witchfinder who was called Dean Dunn. Now, the most famous Aberdeen witch trial was one that saw 7 witches tried for using magic to murder others. So we have a strong connection here in terms of Kirriemuir, that a lot of the witches were apparently found in Kirriemuir and then taken up towards Aberdeen to be trialled. Now, other charges that they were accused of doing, some of these witches: raising storms, casting love spells on young men from the local area, poisoning meats, casting spells on animals, killing harvests, and creating wax figures and torturing people with these wax figures. So that was some of the charges that were brought against some of these witches. Now, Margaret Aitken was a woman who was involved in these witch trials. Now, on the next slide, there's information about an individual who's one of the many during the Aberdeen witch trials, Margaret Aitken. Now, your task is to create a fact file about Margaret Aitken from the information on the following slides. Now, you're looking to include her name, what her nickname, which was also known as, her hometown, when she was arrested, what happened at her trial. So try and write down 2 sentences to describe what happened at her trial. So during 4 months, and then her eventual death. So here is your information on Margaret Aitken here to help you with your fact file. So Margaret Aitken was known as the Great Witch of Balwearie, which is in Fife, and she was likely arrested in Fife in April 1597. She pleaded guilty under torture. However, she offered to help the government identify witches in all parts of the country in exchange for her life. Now, during 4 months, she visited several parts of Scotland, and many people were arrested, put on trial and executed after having been pointed out by her. Now, she was seen almost as a bit of a fraud. So she was taken back to Fife after the government learned that she was a fraud, that she was making things up, that she was going around accusing these other women of being witches just to spare her own life. And she was eventually burnt at the stake in August 1597. Now, the Aberdeen witch trials, in the end, more than 20 women in these witch trials and one man were found guilty of witchcraft. Now, on the whole, they were punished by burning at the stake. Now, if they were found not guilty, they were branded as a witch and banned from living in the local area, so they could be banished. So it was still a form of punishment, but they did survive with their lives. So that's a wee bit on the Aberdeen witch trials and obviously the case of Margaret Aitken as well. So make sure that you have completed your fact file there, and that gives you a bit more detail on what happened with those witch trials. Now, there was eventually a decline of the witch craze. Now, these sometimes ended because many people feared that they were going too far and that a lot of innocent people were starting to be executed. So a lot of people actually started to question about the amount of people that were being killed. Now, witch trials became more rigorous and higher standards of evidence were actually demanded. So if a woman was put on trial or a man put on trial accused of being a witch, better and more stringent evidence was needed to prove that they were a witch. Now, many people felt that witch hunters such as Matthew Hopkins were becoming far too greedy and were starting to attack innocent people just for personal gain, just for money. Now, people still believed in witches and magic, but began to accept that misfortune could happen of its own accord. So what that's saying there is ultimately, you could just be misfortunate, you could be unlucky. It wasn't necessarily witches or magic that was causing that to happen. Eventually as well, educated people gradually stopped believing in witches and magic. Now, during the 18th century, it became fashionable to regard witchcraft as just a superstition. Now, in England, the last execution for witchcraft was actually in 1684. And by 1736, attitudes had changed so much that laws against witchcraft were being repealed in England, so being taken away. Now, the last execution or legal execution for witchcraft in Europe was in Switzerland in 1782. There were women arrested afterwards accused of witchcraft, but none were killed after 1782. Now, you have a question at the bottom here, which I'm going to go over on the next slide. Describe the reasons why the witch craze started to decline. So this is worth 4 marks. So your starter sentence, there are many reasons the witch craze started to decline. Now you have the first point done for you here. So it says, firstly, educated people gradually stopped believing in witches and magic. So it's worth 4 marks, so you need to give 3 more points about why the witch craze started to decline. So use the information on the previous 2 slides which we just went over about why the witch craze started to decline, so why people weren't believing in witches much anymore. Use the information there to help you to answer this question. So again, you might want to pause the video at this point, go back and look at the points that we just discussed about why the witch craze was declining. Now, what we're going to think about next is a how useful task. Now, a how useful question is another type of question you can be asked in history. Now, although we're not going to answer this question today, we're just going to go over this as a class. We're going to think about this source that we're going to look at in terms of how useful it is. Now, what we're going to think about is how useful is the origin, so when the source was written, and telling us about the witch trials in Aberdeen. How useful is the content of the source and telling us about witch trials in Aberdeen? So what does the source actually tell us about the Aberdeen witch trials? And what else could be added in to make the source more useful and tell us about the witch trials in Aberdeen? So what does it miss out? Now, what we're going to look to do here is to highlight the origin of the source, so when the source is actually written. Highlight 2 points from the source, which tell us about the witch trials in Aberdeen, and then 2 points from our own knowledge that isn't mentioned in the source. So this is the source here. So we have source A. Source A details the trial of Janet Wishart, who was accused of witchcraft and is taken from the Aberdeen City Council record written on the 17th of February 1597. It has source A. Name Janet Wishart, dates of the trial, the 2nd of the 2nd 1597 to the 12th of the 2nd 1597. The accused Janet Wishart has been named another witch by the name of Margaret Ogg. Said trial was held in the Tool Booth, Aberdeen. It is accused that Janet Wishart is guilty of the following crimes: delaying the birth of a child and causing said child to be born stillborn, casting spells and cantrips, taking the shape of a dog, meeting with other witches and the devil in Fitty churchyard, spoiling ale, trying to poison a child, causing storms in the North Sea. Janet Wishart has been duly found guilty of all charges and the court has sentenced her to execution. The sentence will be carried out on the 17th of this month. The accused will be burned at Gallow Gate. Signed, Thomas Leslie, Sheriff Depute, James Stewart, Chancellor, Aberdeen. So this source is telling us a bit about the Aberdeen witch trial. So we need to think about, when was the source written? Well, we can see at the top there it's from the 17th of February 1597. what does the source actually tell us about the Aberdeen witch trials, what took place? So some of the points you could have highlighted here. Well, we know it's written on the 17th of February 1597. It's got the dates of the trial. It tells us who's on trial. It tells us what that person is accused of. And it tells us how they've been found guilty and what is happening to them as well. So how we would answer this type of question? We would start off by saying the source was written on the 17th of February 1597. So that's the origin when it was written. This makes it useful because it was written at the time of Janet's witch trial. So there we go, that would be your first point. Then what does the source actually tell us? So the source says, the accused Janet Wishart has been named another witch by the name of Margaret Ogg. So this is useful because it tells us Margaret Ogg, named Janet Witch, is accurate. The source says Janet Wishart has been duly found guilty of all charges and the court has sentenced her to execution. So again, this is useful as it tells us what happened to Janet, which is accurate, so we know that there were people who were found guilty and were executed. The source doesn't tell us there were actually more women killed in the Aberdeen witch trials, it doesn't mention that. And the source doesn't tell us that the accused people were killed by being burned at the stake. So it does tell us that she's going to be executed, but that doesn't actually tell us how she's going to be executed. So that's your typical answer there if you're doing a usefulness question. Now obviously we're not trying this today, this is just to give you a flavour and an introduction to what a usefulness question would look like when we're looking at sources, and that's how your answer would look there. Now your last task for this lesson, witchcraft diary entries. So I want you to imagine you are involved in a witchcraft trial. Now it is the night before the trial and you're about to write your thoughts and feelings on the situation in your diary. Now you must include information about you, so what age are you going to be, what's your class, are you rich, are you poor, information about the place and time in which you live, so where are you going to decide that you're living in Scotland, or if it's Scotland you're deciding you're going to live, you could decide maybe you're living elsewhere in Europe. What is the time period like, how are people feeling, think about why you have been accused or why you're accusing someone. So you decide if in your diary entry you want to say you're being accused of being a witch or you're accusing someone of being a witch. And think about your thoughts and feelings about the impending trial. So that's what you're looking to include in this diary entry. So again, you might want to pause the video at this point to complete this task. Okay, and that is this lesson finished. So what you're looking to upload via Teams for your answers here. So you're looking to upload your Numeracy Ninja answers, so you should have drawn the table and answered the questions underneath that. You're looking to include your Margaret Aitken fact file, who was involved in the Aberdeen witch trials. You're looking to include your answer to the described question on the reasons for the decline of the witch craze. And your last task there, you're looking to include your diary entry as well. Again, if you have any question at all about anything covered in this lesson, then please just ask your teacher. If again you're struggling to upload any of this via the assignment tab on Teams, then you can just email your teacher your work as well. Thank you very much.